Harold Bancroft was the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Born just outside Dallas in 1949, he grew up in a small house with peeling paint, a leaky roof, and a mother who worked 2 jobs. His father died when he was 10, leaving Harold to become the man of the house before he'd even become a teenager. By 25, Harold had turned a pickup truck and a few borrowed tools into Bancroft Materials, a modest construction supply company. And within 15 years, that small business had become a regional giant. Warehouses in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio. A fleet of trucks. 100 employees who called him Mr. B. He didn't get rich fast. He got rich methodically, relentlessly, one order, one handshake at a time. In 1978, Harold met Martha at a fundraiser hosted by the local Rotary Club. She wasn't flashy, a middle school teacher with gentle eyes and a soft Texas drawl. What struck him wasn't her beauty, though she had plenty of it, but her stillness. Her kindness wasn't performative. It was real. She made Harold feel calm, something he hadn't known he needed. They married quietly in 1979. No big celebration, just a courthouse ceremony, a steak dinner, and a drive through the hill country. It was enough for both of them. Their daughter, Candace, came along 3 years later. Harold was thrilled. He bought her the best stroller, the best crib, the best everything. But from the start, Candace was different. She was bold, sharp-tongued, impatient. More like Harold than he wanted to admit. As the years passed, Harold's business exploded. He invested in real estate, restaurants, and even a software startup or 2. Money wasn't just something he made. It became the language he spoke. But that success came at a cost. Time, presence, emotion. Martha filled the silence in their home with books, gardening, and her own quiet strength. Candace, on the other hand, studied her father, learned from him, absorbed his ambition like a sponge. But then came the stroke. A mild one, but enough to rattle Harold's certainty. He slowed down, started walking in the mornings, sitting on the porch with Martha, sipping coffee, watching birds, reading, laughing at jokes again. He wasn't the man he used to be. In some ways, he was finally better. I used to think time was money, he told Martha one evening. But money doesn't buy time, does it? She didn't answer. She just smiled, took his hand, and let the silence say everything. In December 2024, Harold caught pneumonia. At first, it seemed like a bad cold, but it turned fast. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and sorrow. And one early morning, with Martha holding his hand, Harold slipped away quietly. The funeral was grand, all polished wood, dark suits, and big names. Martha didn't speak. She stood like stone. Her goodbye had already happened, quietly, days earlier. Candace arrived late, wearing designer sunglasses and escorted by a sleek man who barely looked up from his phone. She cried, but not for long. The next day, she called Harold's lawyer, Mr. Henson, and requested an immediate review of estate logistics. Henson agreed to a formal meeting. Martha would attend as well. It took place in a wood-paneled office in downtown Austin. Martha arrived early, calm, dressed in gray. Candace arrived late, all perfume and confidence. "Let's make this simple," Candace said. "Dad would have wanted efficiency. The company, the assets, I'll manage all that. Mom can stay in the house, of course. But the rest." She turned to her mother with a smirk. "You're old. You don't need all this. Come on, be honest. You should be living with rescue dogs, not dealing with board meetings." Martha didn't flinch. She simply closed her folder, stood up, and walked out of the room. No anger. No reply. Just dignity. Henson stared at the door she left through, then turned to Candace. "There's another document," he said. "One your father placed in a private safe. He made changes, Candace. 3 months ago." Candace blinked. "What changes?" Henson slid the sealed envelope toward her and said quietly, "Let's just say, this won't go the way you think." The office of Henson and Meyer LLP was polished to a shine. Mahogany shelves, thick Persian rugs, a faint smell of leather and old paper. It was the kind of room designed to make people feel small or powerful, depending on which side of the desk you sat. Martha arrived first, 5 minutes early. She wore a dark navy coat, her silver hair pinned neatly. Her steps were quiet but sure. She said little, only nodded politely to Mr. Henson, who offered her a seat with respectful calm. 15 minutes later, Candace entered like a gust of wind, sunglasses on her head, heels clicking sharply. She didn't look at her mother. She was already talking on her phone. "Sell it if it drops below 6, she told someone on the other end. "I don't care what Jerome said." She ended the call with a swipe, flashed a smile, and sat down. "Well," she said brightly, "let's get this over with." Mr. Hinson cleared his throat and opened a leather folder. "As you both know, we're here to review the last will and testament of Harold Bancroft, revised and signed on August 17th of last year." "I know how this works," Candace interrupted. "Just tell us what's mine and what she gets to keep." "I assume Dad left her the lake house and maybe a few savings bonds." "That's fair." Martha's eyes didn't move. She simply folded her hands in her lap. Candace leaned forward. "Look, Mom, don't make this complicated. You're 72. You don't need companies and properties. Let's be honest, you can barely use a smartphone. You'll get overwhelmed. I'll make sure you have what you need. But the business? The accounts? They need someone who understands money. Someone like me." Martha finally looked up. "And you think that's what your father wanted?" Candace laughed. "Of course he did. He was practical. He knew I could grow the company. You had your time. You lived a beautiful life, Mom. Country clubs, vacations, private chefs. But this is the part where you step aside. Gracefully." She smiled, sweet but sharp. "I'll even set you up somewhere nice. One of those luxury senior places. You'll have yoga classes and dog therapy or whatever it is you like." There was a long silence. Then Candace added, casually but coldly, "But if you're planning to demand half, well, maybe you really do belong out there. With the strays. Feeding pigeons. Out of sight." Mr. Hinson's mouth twitched, but he stayed silent. Martha stood up slowly, adjusting her coat. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at her daughter and said, "You may know how to count money, Candace, but you don't know how to value anything." She turned to leave. Candace didn't follow. She simply crossed her legs and looked to Mr. Hinson. "Well, are we done?" He closed the leather folder and with a steady hand, reached for another. "This," he said quietly, "is your father's final revision. Signed, notarized, and placed in a sealed safe. Delivered to me 3 days ago." Candace's smile faltered. "What, revision?" Hinson tapped the envelope. "One you weren't meant to see until today." Candace's eyes narrowed. Her fingers twitched, itching to snatch the envelope from his hand. But Hinson only slid it across the polished desk, and it stopped just short of her reach. "Open it," he said. Her pulse quickened, and with a sharp inhale, she tore the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded crisply. She unfolded it with deliberate care, eyes scanning the neat, precise handwriting. "To my daughters, Candace and Martha," she read aloud, voice trembling despite herself. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. I want you both to have what I have left, but not equally. Some things cannot be split." Her gaze flicked up to Martha, who stood with her back to the window, the soft light haloing her silver hair. Candace continued reading, voice growing louder, anger creeping in. "Candace, you will receive the shares of Bancroft Industries, the controlling interest, to manage as you see fit. Martha, you will receive the lake house, the savings bonds, and my personal collection of art and antiques." She paused, biting her lip. "But there is one condition. Martha will serve as the trustee of a discretionary family trust, which holds the majority of liquid assets. Neither of you will have direct access to the funds without unanimous approval from both." Candace slammed the letter down. "What the hell is this? A trust? You mean I don't get full control of the company?" Hinson cleared his throat. "Mr. Bancroft was very clear about protecting the family legacy and about keeping the sisters connected, even if it meant sharing power." Candace's jaw clenched. "So, you expect us to run this thing together? Joint decisions? That's a joke. She's barely been involved." Martha stepped forward, calm but firm. "Your father knew what you said earlier, Candace, about me stepping aside. He thought it was foolish. That family is more than numbers and stocks." Candace's eyes burned with something unspoken, a flash of pain buried beneath her sharp exterior. "Maybe he was wrong," she whispered, voice low but fierce. Mr. Hinson stood and closed the folder. "Now, the next step will be a meeting with the family lawyer to discuss the trust details and how the company will be managed moving forward." Candace gathered her things, her fingers still trembling slightly. "I don't like this," she muttered, "but I'll play along for now." Martha smiled softly. "For now," she echoed, "is a good place to start." The days that followed the reading of the will felt like walking through a storm, cold, relentless, and unpredictable. Martha and Candace were thrust into a new reality neither had anticipated. The fragile balance of power within the family trust quickly became a battleground, and every decision seemed to widen the invisible chasm between them. Martha found herself in the office late at night, poring over documents, learning the language of finance and trust management with surprising ease. Candace's earlier dismissiveness turned into quiet frustration as she realized her mother was no longer the passive figure she had once underestimated. But it wasn't just business that changed. One evening, after a particularly tense board meeting, Martha stood by the lake house window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The water shimmered, a mirror reflecting the burning sky, beautiful, untamed, and deep. Candace entered quietly, closing the door behind her. For a long moment, they just stood there, two women separated by years and resentment, yet bound by the same blood and history. "I never thought Dad would do this," Candace said finally, voice softer than before. "Make us share everything." Martha didn't turn. "He wanted us to be partners, not enemies." Candace hesitated, then crossed the room to stand beside her. "Maybe I was wrong," she admitted, eyes on the fading light. "Maybe there's more to this than just money." A silence grew between them, heavy but healing. Martha finally smiled, a genuine, tender smile. "Maybe this is our chance. To rebuild what was broken. To find value where you said none existed." Candace nodded slowly. "For the first time, I'm willing to try." Outside, the lake settled into darkness, the first stars appearing like silent witnesses to a new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, Martha and Candace faced the future together, not as adversaries, but as sisters.